done, and it looks really good. Also in the works for upcoming is a CDL class, the theory portion of it, and I know one of the closest places I think is Lehigh to do that. So that'll be a wonderful program to start up there. I know that that's an in-demand field. Other than that, I think that's about all. Thank you. My next meeting is October 19th. So.
And the next committee report is Pennridge Community Educational Foundation. Mrs. Collin?
I'm actually going to pass it over to Mrs. Walters. She attended the meeting.
Okay. Just a couple things. There's an SAT boot camp, which is put on by PCEF that will be this weekend. An email went home to parents. And there are some dine and donates on the calendar that benefit PCEF. There's one at Bankers on October 8th, and then there's one at the Perk on April 6th, so that's a couple months away. And then they set their date for their lovely evening, which is their biggest event, at the Washington House on April 21st. And our next meeting is the first Saturday. What is that, the 5th? October 5th at 8:30. Thank you. Okay, next is old business.
I could have added it to my committee report in curriculum, but it is old business since it has to do with last month when I wasn't here. And I wish I could have been here to address some of the things that Dr. Bolton, you had, the reports about the scores and things with that niche report that had come out. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention something. And I just want to say that it's unfortunate that in the public, for whatever reason, there's misinformation. I don't know what the motivation is, but I will agree with something that I saw someone say, which was that we teach our children about bullying and how not to be a bully, and yet it seems like adults are bullying people on social media. So I don't know if that group that was posting that information bothered to post anything about our comprehensive counseling program, or the fact that our literacy pilot over in Sellersville had such a great success rate already. But I would just, suggest to that group and to anyone in the public to make sure the information that you're sharing is correct, because you're not just bullying the people who are doing the great work here, our educational professionals, our administrative professionals. You're really bullying the whole community by spreading false information and giving people anxiety. So I just wanted to mention that since I wasn't here last month.
Anyone else have anything for old business? Okay. New business? Okay, so just to touch base about, obviously we have to appoint a new board director. We have 30 days from the resignation date based on the law. So that gives us a very limited period of time to be able to start that process and have someone appointed. We don't have a board meeting scheduled right now, between now and 30 days from now, so we'll work together to try to find a date that works to be able to schedule a board meeting to be able to have that vote before that deadline. The last process, the last time we had to appoint board directors, there were 2 openings, and the way that we conducted the process was we asked any interested applicants to send a letter of interest, their resume, and all board members contributed questions, and those questions were compiled along with the questions that had been used in other settings for this in the past. And so we compiled all of those questions and posted them so that all applicants could thoroughly answer all of those questions and submit that to us so that we could get a clear understanding of their backgrounds and their interests and the responses to questions that people were interested in. And then all of the information, all of those were printed and distributed to every single board member. And then each board member reviewed all of the information that was submitted for all of the candidates, came to the next board meeting, and we opened nominations so that any board member can nominate any of the candidates, any of the people who had applied, any of the applicants, and all of those So you could nominate as many people as you wanted, then we closed nominations and then took a vote in order of the people who were nominated. And the first person to receive the majority, a majority vote would be the person who would be selected. That's also the opportunity if board members, this is not a personnel, a board member is not considered personnel, so it's not something that is discussed in executive session. So if board members have questions, comments, or concerns, or want to discuss it, that would all happen in that board meeting. And that was the process. Last time, the applicants then are welcome to come to that meeting and, come up and introduce themselves. And if we have any board business after that evening, then they have to join and continue on. So that was the process last time. If we did that, I would suggest we post all of the information. Again, I would suggest if anyone has, each board member send questions. Any questions that you want answered, and I'll reach out. Each of you send all of that to me. Mr. Krause and I can sit down and compile all of that, and put that together. And then I'm hoping to get this posted as early as possible because it's a very short window that we have, and the PSBA conference is also right before that window ends. So that takes off a week of the 4 weeks that we basically have. So is everyone comfortable with that process? Okay, so then if you could all submit or contact me with any questions that you have, we'll compile them, and then we'll get those over to Mrs. Chenoweth, and then all of the applications and information would be submitted to her, and then she will distribute it to all of us. I'm hoping that I'll sit down with Dr. Bolton and come up with a timeline that makes sense, and then we'll get that all posted as soon as possible. So if board members can, I know it's short notice, but even if you can get back to me by tomorrow, if you're not doing anything tonight, that'd be great. So we can get this, give as much time as possible for people to respond. And then, this was also posted out in different newspaper. I guess however we post our meetings, it would be posted the same way so that people know that these openings exist and that people can apply. So, all right. Does anyone else have any other new business? No? Okay. Well, then we are back to public comment. The same rules apply. Questions or comments from anyone?
I feel like I have problems with this microphone. Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa Wilson from Edmonton Township. Nice to see everybody tonight. Nice to see the service workers. So I wanted to just make I have a couple questions and a couple short comments. One, I was wondering if we could have any update on the support staff contract. I know a lot of times we don't hear a lot of details about that, but usually we hear a little bit of updates along the way. So I was wondering if you had anything to share about that. I believe that was up in the end of last academic year. And I do want to say that I don't appreciate mischaracterizations about community members who come up here and speak. I don't like words like lying. I think you can give people facts and then let them make the conclusion about what's accurate, and there's a lot of sources where you can find information, like the newspaper. So I think it makes people uncomfortable to speak in front of the board. So, I request that you please watch that. And then I also want to say that this is a perfect forum for questioning board members about their opinions and the evolution of their opinions independently. Because even when they're out in the community and they're not sitting with the entire board, when they speak about issues concerning school, you do represent the school. So it's certainly not unfair to ask for explanation. And if you don't wish to share it, it's okay, but it's not. This is not a bad forum for that. I do want to ask whether or not the contract for the engineering firm has been signed. I know it was approved in June, but I haven't seen anything publicly about that. So I was wondering kind of what was going on with that. I actually did file a right to know about that, and I didn't get any information at all. I was really surprised about that because it was just the hiring of an engineering firm. So I didn't see it as being private or needing to be an executive session, or what would be the big deal about sharing any kind of relevant information, even if you didn't feel like you could share all of it. So anyway, any thoughts you have on that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Kevin Foster, Hilltown Township. I think it's really important, I like what the previous commenter just said, I think it's really important to remember that the Pennridge School Board really is meant to represent thousands of students, families, employees, and taxpayers across the entire district. That's the first thing. And echoing what the previous commenter said, I think it's really inappropriate to refer to anyone who comes up and shares an opinion as dishonest. I think that's just, we really shouldn't do that. It paints the district in a bad light. And then second, I did follow the previous board openings, and the facts really are, and these are undisputed, previous school boards before this one did solicit candidates from the community, and instead of asking the board to submit questions individually in email that it is outside of public view, those candidates were interviewed in public in a meeting like this tonight. And I think that's really important. And my question is, will you commit to doing that? Will you change precedent based on what you did last time? And will you solicit applicants and then introduce them to the community and have them interview in front of the community? Will you do that? That's my question. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Diane Herring, Hilltown Township. There were some comments that were made that I'll address separately, but I actually came regarding a different issue. 3/26/2019 was set as the deadline for RFP submissions for the engineering firms. This was not a bid process because in the state of Pennsylvania, you do not have a bid process for services. It's actually called an RFP, request for price, or request for quote, whatever you want to call it at that time. The RFP was submitted and RFP responses were submitted and were discussed in public on April 9th at the Facilities Committee. Those meeting minutes document this and were publicly voted on the April 15th board meeting. In none of these discussions or meeting minutes was there any reference to a mid-June engineering firm interview session. In fact, the meeting minutes clearly stated by Dr. Bolton stated the interviews would be done in the next facility meeting and then 2 more at another committee meeting in May. That's documented in writing, Facilities Committee meeting minutes. That was meetings in May, no mention of June. I note this because the district received an RTK submitted July 25th, 2019 that requested all communication for these June interviews. But that was never a public date reference that I can find in any board meeting minute or on any board agenda. So how did anyone in the general population know about a June engineering firm interview session enough to put it in an RTK? I'd like to know where from the board I find that official public notification that those interviews were held then, and that was public knowledge. What I did find, however, exceptionally interesting in that documentation supplied to the RTK were the emails as responsive records. The emails range from April 9th through June 11th. There was private communication with only one candidate who submitted an RFP answer, advising them who would and would not be present at the interviews. Only one, not all of them, only submitted given insider information the night before their interview. It's clearly a major issue here. I don't know what's going on with this engineering firm bid and the claims that there's some sort of implication about secret board meetings, backdoor decisions, calls for transparency, but the fact is those emails unveil a much larger issue.
Ms. Herring, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to
I
have to
would appreciate that, thank you.
Sue Furlong, West Rockland Township. I want to thank the board for passing the rebate program for the low-income seniors and disabled persons within Pennridge. I remember back when I was on the board, we were having a severe recession, and I remember I asked, and I don't know that anybody else did, was there a way for us to treat our low-income seniors differently and give them some sort of a rebate? And I was told by the board president at that time, who happened to be Mr. Peter Yarnell, no, that we don't do that. I do recall also that Ms. Cullen had requested that we look into it when she first got on the board, and she was also told by the board president, Mr. Peter Yarnell, no, we don't do that. It's unfortunate he wasn't here tonight to make that vote. It reminds me of when he missed the vote to pass the Upper Bucks Tech School budget.
I'm going to interrupt you. We're giving you your full 3 minutes, but I just encourage you to make sure that you're making a comment to the full board.
I am. I'm talking about the whole board and their actions under certain leadership.
Thank you for directing your comments to the whole board. Thank you.
So I am sorry that he's not here to make that vote. His group did bring this up in, as they say, in early spring. And so the opportunity to bring that forth in committee has been for the last 4 or 5 months, and it has not been brought forth. And that's a disappointment as well. But I am happy that it finally, this board is taking the action, getting it done. And I'm sure that the community will be happy to give some assistance to our least able citizens. And hats off, I think it did get pushed by both sides of the table, but getting it done is what matters, not talking about it. And I believe that the main leader of one group has had opportunity after opportunity, and I don't understand why it wasn't done earlier. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So,
Are
do
you
you want
going
to,
to? Well, I just wanted to ask the solicitor to clarify when the distinction between a campaigning event and an event where a board member is a representative of the board, because I would suggest that those are two very different things. So I just wanted some clarification on that.
Ms. Cullen, it's difficult to draw a precise line of board members when they are in public, of course. As by board policy, have no particular power for the board. It's written in board policy. I know something or other. I just read it. And they, of course, have their right to speak under the First Amendment and say what is on their mind. There is a difference, as you pointed out, between being at a community event representing the board, or being at the technical school representing the board, or being at the other meetings representing the board, and of course being in a campaign setting. While I have the microphone, since I've seized it, a couple other updates or notes. With regard to the individual who asked about the engineering firm contracts, I would suggest to you that that's stuck in lawyer ping pong right now. and it is endemic to two lawyers getting their hands on the contract that we're arguing about comments and periods and hyphens and numbers and things like that. So through no fault of the district or anybody up here, that is just something that remains on both of our desks and ought to be on a future agenda very soon. With regard to the support staff, I'm afraid that the board, under my advice, can't comment on labor negotiations because it would be inappropriate to do so. And with regard to the question with regard to right to know law, I can assure the individuals in the public that every right to know law request that we get is scrutinized by Mr. Daubert, his staff, as well as my staff, and we give the same consideration to each request, no matter who it comes from, and we provide documents when we're permitted to do so, and when they fall within the category of documents can be disclosed, and when they fall within categories which are excluded, then we assert that exclusion, and people may take an appeal, as some people have. It's pretty much in the regular course of business. There's nothing new or exciting about either the processing of those or the response to those, although we certainly try and do that as quickly and as expeditiously as possible, except that there's always a fair amount of documents to review and eventually stop reading until the next day. But we do what we can to get them out as quickly as possible. Thank you, Madam President.
So just to go back to a few of the questions, I jotted notes around, so I'll try to hit them all. As far as the contract, what I can say is that we are still negotiating. We're working well. It's just it's a complicated process. This is a contract where it was all different contracts that were for all different groups that were meshed together in one group. And so there's a lot of logistics in that, and so there's a lot of details, to go through, and so it's something that we're still working on. As far as you had already mentioned the engineering contract, I'm going to try to explain the difference because maybe I wasn't clear. If you want to ask what a board member thinks of the senior tax rebate, since that's the topic, I can tell you what my opinion is on a senior tax rebate. But if you ask me what I meant by a comment that I made about another group, then I can't respond to that without explaining what my comment meant with regard to the other group. And so that's where the line gets crossed. It's not asking me my opinion, it's asking me, and so it puts me in a position where I need to respond to a situation that is not in our professional role. And so that was the difference. Believe me, I'd love to answer the questions, but it's just, not the appropriate time to be asking them. And don't worry, I'm happy to give answers in other locations. The comment was made about calling people who come up here dishonest. Again, it was a comment about a group, not talking about a person here speaking, which is not the same thing. And then there was a comment about, sharing the different facts. But in my experience, there's really only been one set of facts. There's lots of opinions, but typically facts, there aren't a bunch of different ones. I think that's it. The announcements, we will be having an executive session following this meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. And, well, the next board meeting we'll announce tomorrow or when this process ends, because we're going to have to add a board meeting before the next board meeting. So that would be to be determined. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rice. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.